So here is what you end up with when you complete the tutorial. By default it loads up 10 comments at a time, so here's 10 comments here. When we scroll down, this loader appears and it will show the new comments 10 at a time, but because we've only got 11 comments in total, it's only going to load one more comment because there's only one more comment to show. The loader disappears now because it's basically saying that there's no more comments to load. We can post a new comment like so. And we post a new comment, the page doesn't refresh, but we can scroll down. All these comments refresh when we do this, and the new comment will be there. And again, if you refresh the page, all the comments are stored in a database, so the comment will still be there. The database is where all these comments came from. What else can we do? We can view the replies. Again, all these replies will be stored in the database. We can like this, and then the number of likes will also be stored in a database. So on page refresh, the number of likes will remain the same. We could also unlike as so. We can reply. We could also reply up there, but I'm just showing you how we reply down here. There you go, you apply like that. This number updates now, the reply appears. We're called super user by default because we are not connecting this comment system to an authenticated user system. If you want to learn authentication in React, then please watch my previous tutorial. From there, you'll be able to easily link it up with this comment system. But if I did that, then this video would simply be too long. So when we refresh the page, it's stored in the database, so the comment's still there. We can delete it, and again, without page refresh, it's deleted in real time. And again, when we refresh, it's gone now, it's now been deleted. And this is the comment system that you'll be creating. It's surprisingly difficult, all things considered. So stay tuned and learn how to create this. So before the main video, I just wanted to insert this quick real life section to explain some of the details that you need to know before you watch the upcoming tutorial. So first of all, we're not creating a fully functioning comment system that's linked up to an authenticated user. If you wanted to learn how to do user authentication in React, then head over to the description and watch my video on how to do React authentication. From there, you can link up the authenticated user to the comment system very easily. But what we will be doing in this tutorial is we will be learning how to do the infinite scrolling comment system effect, which is commonly used in a lot of social media platforms. We'll be doing this in React, and you will also be learning how to create a comment system that is professional looking. It's based off the YouTube design, which is currently being used on the YouTube website at the time of recording this video. And because of this tutorial will be a bit more challenging than my previous videos. If you're a beginner, I just wanted to let you know that this will probably challenge you, and maybe it's above your skill level. So before you watch this video, maybe you want to learn some of the more basic content of React. I just wanted to let you know before this video begins, and it will begin now. And also actually like and subscribe, because this video, I put in a lot of effort into this video, so I hope you enjoy it. I hope you benefit from it. I hope you like and subscribe because of it. Okay, so I've just run npx create React app in my terminal, and I've created this default boilerplate React app. Obviously we're going to delete a lot of these files because we simply don't need them. We can delete these logos as well. And we're just going to simply delete this as well because we don't need it. We'll say hello world, delete the logo because it no longer exists. And along with the app elements, we're going to delete the styling that comes along with it. Once we've deleted all the unnecessary content, the first thing that we need to do is actually in this index.html file, which our React application will get rendered to via the root div. We will go to the head and we will create a new comment, specify what we're doing in the head of the HTML document. We'll say font awesome, because what we're going to do is we're going to import the font awesome content delivery network before we do anything else. So you'll go to font awesome, and we'll need to log into our account. So click on our profile, I've already logged in. click on Font Awesome CDN because we'll be using its icons later on. Just copy the content delivery network, paste it there. The other thing that we'll need to import into the head before we continue with anything else will be a Google font that I like using called Open Sans. So we'll just say Google font Open Sans. I like using this font because it's readable on both large screens and small screens, i.e. mobile devices, which is good. So we'll say Google font Open Sans and click on the first link. We'll need to copy two different weights. We'll copy the regular weight and we'll also copy the bold weight. So we'll just copy the regular one first of all, both of the link tags, but then when we copy the bold weight, we'll only need to copy the latter link tag because that's the one that is related directly to the bold weight. So we'll copy it there. Might as well create a new comment just so we know exactly what we're doing. Bold weight, there you go. Once you've imported the necessary content, we'll go to app.css file and we'll use a star to select all the elements. We'll say box sizing border box. This will help with the positioning later on, and we will move the browser's default margin and padding as so, and we'll also use the Open Sans font family on all of the elements. So we'll just copy it here. If it fails to load, then by default we use sans serif. Once you've imported the necessary content, we'll just check out the index.js file. We can delete this because we don't need it, and we'll delete that because it's directly related to it, and plus we've already deleted it. And now we can go to our terminal and we can say npm start to see our hello world text in the Open Sans font that we imported. Let's wait for it to load. Yep, as you can see, it's in the font that we want as well, which is good, so we can continue with the application now. So we'll go back to our app.js and we'll change this divider here. We'll change the class name to coal holder. This is very important to configure the width of our application. So we'll configure that now, but first we'll select everything in the body because we want to change the background color of our entire application. It will be a light shade of grey, so it will be F9, 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 that will be the hex code. And then we will select the coal holder class. So I believed it was in camel case, so we'll write it out like that. So margin will be 0 on vertical, but horizontal will be auto, in other words it will be centered in the middle. Width will be 100% of the document, but we'll say max width 1600 pixels. So this will be, so on large applications like desktop, it won't take up all of the width, but as soon as our viewport is less than 1600 pixels, then the coal holder will take up 100% of the width. So now if we go back onto our application, we should see this hello world has been moved to the left side of the coal holder, which is what we want. Going back to our app.js file, we will create a new folder in our source and it will contain all of the components. So I'll say components. We'll create a new subfolder from that and we'll say comments box. And from that we'll create one more. We'll say top comment box, and then we'll create a new file. It will relate to its folder name, so we'll say top commentsbox.js, and then we'll use the RSF keyword to create a new React stateless functional component. If you are confused about this, it's an extension, it's not built into VS Code, so I'll show you what it's called. If I just scroll down, this is what it's called React Code Snippets, and it's by this person here, because I know there's alternative React Code Snippets extensions. That's the one that I use, just in case you're wondering. And then we'll go back to our index.js. From here we'll go back to our app.js and then we'll import it. So we'll say import top comment box from the file that we created, so that would be the root directory component / comments box / top comments box / top comments box, and then we'll replace this hello world with the top comments box, and we'll also give it a property called autofocus, and it'll be a boolean of false. You'll see why we do this later on, because top comments box will return an input element which will by default won't be autofocused. So we'll get rid of this div and we'll replace it with a form element. Inside will be an input element which is self-closing, and then we will give it the autofocus value of the property which we just passed in to the top comments box component. Props dot autofocus. We'll say type text because it's text input. Placeholder will be the one that YouTube uses, so it will say add a public comment and then ellipsis. We'll say ref, we'll give it a reference of message. Obviously we haven't created this reference yet, so what we need to do, we need to import useRef along with React. And then we say const message equals useRef. Initially be null, but then until it gets initialized to this input element. Below this input element, we're going to create a comment. The way that we do that is curly braces, and then /* I don't know why that's there. And then we'll just say underline begins here, because if you noticed on the YouTube comment system, there's an underline that expands outwards when they click on the message box. The way that we'll achieve this, we'll create a div element. It won't contain any content, but it will have class name of comment line, we'll say. Below this, we will, first of all, actually we need to contain all this text in a section, so we could separate it out from the buttons. We will give it a class name of comment box. So before we create the buttons, I think it's a good time to do the styling for the comments box. It's inside the comments box folder, not the top comments box folder, just the main one. We will create a new file called commentsbox.css. We'll need to import the style sheet to our top commentsbox.js file, so we'll say import, we'll say .. to go up one directory, and then we'll say commentsbox.css to require the style sheet. Now if we go on application, we can see what we've created. As you can see, it looks nothing like the YouTube comments box, so this is the reason why we need to heavily style it. First thing that we will style, we'll say input, its font family will be inherit, so it inherits the default open sans font, and font size we'll set it to be 100%, so it also inherits the default font size. The form element itself will be overflow auto. This is to expand the form's height in regards to the buttons, which will be floated to the right of the form. Below this, we will target the text input of the form using the following selector: form input bracket type equals text. Target the text type input. Width will be 100% of its parent, in this case the form. Outline will be none, so there won't be a faint border when we click on the text input, which is what some browsers give it by default. Its border will also be none. The outline and the border are not the same. It's important to bear that in mind. Its border at bottom will be 1 pixel solid light grey. So it will have a borderline on the bottom, just not on the other sides. Its padding will be as follows: 12 pixels top, 20 pixels right, 12 pixels bottom, 0 pixels left. And background color, we'll set it to be nothing, so transparent. Now if you go back, it's starting to look a bit like the YouTube comments input. And we'll set the comment box to that section element, we'll say position. We'll set it to be relative. This is to help out with the comment line, which will be absolute position. So we'll say comment line position absolute, as I just said. Bottom will be 0, so it'll be on the bottom of the section. Width will be 100% though of its parent elements of the section. Height will simply be 2 pixels hard coded. Background color, we want it to be a black line, so black. And now if we refresh, we should be able to see that yes, there is a line here, but we don't want it to be visible unless the user focuses in on the input element. So we will say, at the moment, we'll say transform scale X on the horizontal axis 0. So it'll be squished to 0 width. In other words, it won't be visible, which is what we want. So this is the ready state for the animation. We'll create the animation down below. We'll say keyframes comment line scale in 0%. We will repeat its beginning state, so scale x0, and then 100% where we transform, except the scale will be its complete width, which is 100% of the section. And then we need to apply this animation to the element, so we'll say animation comment line scale in 0.2 seconds with animation time, and it will retain the last keyframe of the animation as specified by forwards. Now if we go back to our document and we refresh, we can see that very briefly it expands inwards. This is the animation that we want, but we only want the animation to be triggered not upon element creation, but when the user focuses in on the input text. So we'll go back to our top commentsbox.js file, and we will create a state that determines whether or not the comment line elements will be rendered. So we'll create a comment, we'll say trigger the underline animation. We will say const show comment line, and then set comment line. We're using array destructuring because we'll import the use state hook, and then we'll create that use state. Will be a boolean initially set to false. Whilst we're creating the state, you might as well create the other state. So we'll say true on focus, false on cancel press. This is referring to the show button state, which will be toggled when the user focuses on the input text, but also when they click on the cancel button. So we'll say show buttons, and then set show buttons will be the method used to toggle it. And then that will also be a boolean of false. And then we'll create a new comment, true on input data, false when input is blank. This refers to whether or not the enable button will be enabled or not. You'll see more on that later on. So we'll say enable btn, set enable btn will be the method. And that will be use state that will initially be set to true. True, false, it doesn't really matter because it will be handled by an event handler anyway. Then we'll create the event handler that will be triggered when the user focuses in on the input element. So we'll say const comment focus equals a function. So we'll use an arrow function just to make the layout look nice. We'll say set comment line or true because we want the comment line to appear and begin the animation, and we'll also say set show buttons to true because we want the buttons to appear, and we'll create a comment above this so we know what we're doing. We'll say when they click on the input, show the underline and the buttons. This is obviously just for future reference. Below that we need to create another event handler, so we'll say when they click on the input, hide the underline. This will be the event handler that is on the blur event of the input element. So when they click off the input element, we want the underline to disappear. So we'll say comment focus out. Again, another function. Set comment line, that'll be false. Below this you need to create another event handler. We'll say if input value isn't empty, then enable the comment btn. This will refer to the onKeyUp event handler, which we'll create it now. It will say comment stroke equals event equals a function with the event as an argument. With this event argument we can get access to the value of the input because this event handler will be placed on the input. So we'll do this. We'll say cur message, shorthand for current message, equals event.target.value, and then we'll say if cur message has a value. So in other words, they've typed something into the input element. We'll say set enable btn to true. So they'll be able to send a comment now. But else set enable btn, we'll say false. Actually no, it'll be the other way around. The reason why is because this value will be assigned to the disabled attribute on the button element. So When they've typed in nothing, we want it to be disabled, but when they have typed in a value, you want it to be enabled, so the disabled attribute will therefore take in the false property. Now we need to create these buttons because we haven't even created them yet. What we would do is we will create them in an expression. So we'll say show buttons, and so the elements in the parentheses will only be rendered when the show buttons state is set to true, because the elements rendered in the parentheses will be the buttons. So there's the reason for the name. We'll create a button. I have a class name of comment button and also send button, and then we'll say disabled. This will take in the enable btn state value, and for now we'll just say have the text comment. Below that we'll create another button. This one will just have the class name of whoops. Oh yeah, so the reason for this is because there needs to be a parent element, so we'll just create an empty element like so. It doesn't contain any content. This one will just have the class of comment button, nothing else. We'll also have some inline styling, just because this will be too hard to style it. In the style sheet, its color will be grey, and we'll set its background color to be transparent, and its text will say cancel. We'll give it to onClick listener as well on the new line. We'll set onClick will be a callback function, and we'll say set show buttons to set that to false. Along with that we'll also say message.current.value. We'll set that to be an empty string, so it will wipe out the current data of the input element when they click on the cancel button. We'll also need to assign the necessary event handlers onto the input element. So we'll say on focus, we will give it the event handler that we just created, which is comment focus. On blur, we'll give it the relevant one as well, which is comment focus out. And on key up, we'll give it comment stroke event handler. So now when we go back to our page, you click on the input element and these buttons appear. Obviously they haven't been styled yet, which is the key thing that we need to do. So we'll go to our comments box style sheet, and we will create a new comment to separate things out a bit. We'll say buttons, so we know that we're styling the buttons below the comment. We'll style the comment button class as so. Font family will be inherit. So in other words, inherit the open sans font. Font size, that will be 0.9, the root element font, so the default open sans. Font size, font weight will be bold. Float to the right, because we want it aligned to the right. Border will be none. Margin with 10 pixels on the top, 0 on the right and bottom, but then 10 pixels on the left. Padding will be 10 pixels vertical, but then 20 pixels horizontal. Cursor will be pointer, and border radius will be 2 pixels, because you don't want straight corners. And then the send button, which is the one that applied to the button which says comment, we'll say that background color, that will be a hex value of 065FD4. It's a nice blue color, but the actual text color will be white, and we want to style its disabled state, which is the default state, because it's only enabled when the user types something into the text input. So we'll say send button, and then we'll give it a pseudo class of disabled. Its color will be white again, and we'll say cursor default, so it's not pointer anymore. And the background color will just be a tinge of grey, which we'll create as a hex value of CCC, CCC, so 6 C's in total. Now if we go back, we can see, as you can see, the buttons have appeared there. When you press cancel, the buttons have disappeared. Going back to our top comments box component, what we need to do is we need to add some conditional rendering to this comment line div. So what we'll do is we'll use curly braces around the divider, and then we'll say comment line and it's show comment line actually, sorry, yeah, it's this one. So now the comment line will only be rendered to when the show comment line state is set to true, and it's currently set to false. Only when they click on the input, then the bottom line animates outwards. When we type in value, this becomes enabled. We click cancel and then everything disappears. So this is how we want it at the moment. One more thing that we will do, but we won't complete it at the moment, we'll give this comment button an on click. This will take in an event handler saying send comment, and we will create this below. Get a comment, send comment, const send comment equals a function. All we'll say is event.prevent default. So this prevents the page refresh, which is the default behavior of a button event when it's clicked. So this event handler will create a new comment when we click on the comment button, but we haven't even created the backend yet, so we're not going to complete this event handler code. I just wanted to create it for future reference. Once we've done this, it's now time to create a new file called the message scroll. So we'll create that inside of the source folder, so outside of any components folder. So we'll create it like so. What we're going to do is, again, it was going to be another stateless function. All of our entire application will be comprised of functional components, simply because that's the modern way of developing applications in React now. Once you've created it, we will require it in the app.js. So we'll say import message scroll, because you've automatically done a default export on that file, and then we'll acquire it. It's in just the source folder, the same folder as the app.js, and then below where we've done the top comments box, we will create the message scroll element. So we'll just say message scroll like so. This message scroll component will render all of our elements below the top comments box, and it will also handle the infinite scrolling logic. So this is a very important component for us to create. Once we've created it, we'll need to render out some messages. So the messages themselves will be their own components. So inside of the components folder, we'll create a new folder called message. Inside that, we'll create another subfolder just for later usage called submessage. And inside the message folder, not the submessage subfolder, we'll create a new file called message.js. At the moment, this won't contain anything, but we're just creating it so we can write it out in the message scroll. So we created it like that. We can close it for now because we won't be using it. But we'll just import that message from the message.js file that we just created. So it'll be in components, message, and the message, the file itself. At the moment, we'll set the message scroll to just return one of those messages. Later on, it will return a list of those messages, and it will automatically fill out the props from data retrieved from the database. But at the moment, we're not doing any of this because we haven't created the backend yet. So we'll just render out one single message element. Below that will be a div. This div will act as the loader that appears at the bottom of the rendered messages. So we'll give it a class name for styling later on. It will say bottom bar, make sure that's caps actually, that'd be. Inside it will contain another div, which will be our loader. And that'll have class name of loader. We will style these two things inside of the app.css file. So I'll open it up like this, and we'll create a new comment so we know what we're doing in future reference. We'll say message scroll, and we will style the bottom bar class as so. It will be display, we'll say display flex. The width will be 100% of the call holder. Margin 20 pixels vertical but 0 horizontal. And justify content will be center, it's a horizontal centering in this case. The loader itself, we'll say width 50 pixels, height 50 pixels, that'll be a square at the moment. To turn the square into a circle, we'll say border radius 50%. Now the square will be turned into a circle. We'll say that we'll give the border 5 pixels solid, and then it will be a light grey colour, so we'll say F3, repeat that 2 more times. And then border top, we'll say 5 pixels solid, but then it will be a darker shade of grey, so it's 60, 60, 60 with the hex value. And now if we see what this looks like in our React app, as you can see, it's just a static loader here, it's not moving. To rotate it infinitely, we'll need to create an animation, so we'll say keyframes, we'll call the animation spin, 0%, whoops, we'll say transform, rotate 0 degrees, so it's static at the moment, then 100%, animation end, rotate 360 degrees, so 1 full rotation in the single animation. And then we'll say spin, apply the animation that we just created, lasts for 1 second, linear, same speed throughout, and then infinite, so it keeps on repeating forever. Now if you go back, as you can see, it's spinning how you want it to, it's spinning forever because it just repeats on animation end. Another thing that we'll need to do inside the message scroll component, we'll need to pass in some properties into this message component. We will say user, user will just be some dummy data, so we say dummy user. And then we'll give it an editable property, which will be false. You'll see how this boolean relates to the message later on. So in other words, this message, because it doesn't come from our user, we won't be able to delete it, but we will be able to apply to it. Give it a message property. This message property will say simply dummy message. Likes, we'll just say 25 likes. And then we won't do anything else for now. We will go inside of the message JavaScript file now, and we'll create the content that we need to return. So first of all, we're going to create an empty element, just so the functional component is returning 1 single element. We'll create a section element to begin with. This section element will wrap all of the content, so we'll give it a class name of message container. Inside this, we'll create a div. This will take in the props.user, so it will display the user who made the message, and that will have class name of message user. Below that div, we'll create an icon. This will be a font awesome icon. It will be user profile, so FA user circle. This is just a default sort of dummy avatar. We're not going to get into customizing the individual avatars because that's not the purpose of this tutorial. Below that, we will create another div, and that will have class name message text, and that will display the message that the user created, so props.message. No, it's no capitals, just checking. Yeah, it's no capitals. This one, in this instance, it should say dummy message. Below this, we'll create another section. This section will show the thumbs up and thumbs down icons, so we'll give it a class name so we can style it and separate things out. We'll say message icons container. Inside the section, we will create an icon. Another one, we have a class name of SAS, specify font awesome icons, thumbs hyphen up. This is the thumbs up icon. Below this, we want to display the number of likes to the right of the thumbs up icon, so we'll create another div. This div will simply show likes number, so we say props.likes. Below this div, we will create another icon, and that will say class name FAS, specify font awesome, FA thumbs down. And below this, we'll use curly braces. The condition will be props.editable. So remember that boolean that we passed in as a property of message. So if it's false, then the text to the right of the thumbs down will say reply, because we can reply to other users' comments, and we'll give this inline styling. We'll say cursor pointer, but if it is true, then the text will say delete, but it will still have cursor pointer, and then the section ends. So below that section we'll create a new section and we'll give it the class name of arrow replies. Inside the section we'll create a div which says view and then replies, but we want a number in between here, and what we'll say props.replies.length, and we want a number here, so at the moment we'll just say 4, but later on this will be replaced with a property which is based on the number of replies, and we'll leave it at that for now. This will be heavily altered later on because we need to create the styling now. So in a new file in the message folder we'll say message.css. so we'll start the message container first. We'll say message container, its position will be relative, its width will be 100% of the call holder, remember. Word wrap, to make sure that the words can go on multiple lines, we'll say break word, margin 20 pixels 0, and we'll give it some left padding of 50 pixels. Below that we will style the avatar. So if we go on our, see what it looks like at the moment, as you can see this is just completely not right. This needs to be to the side. So what we're going to do is, actually no, so this hasn't even been applied yet, sorry. So I need to actually apply it first. So message.css to apply the styling. And now as you can see, everything's moved towards the right a bit because we added the padding left. But this icon, it needs to be moved towards the left. So we'll say position absolute. We'll target it using its specific class, like so. We'll say position, that will be absolute. Its font size will be 2.2 based off of the root font size decided by the browser. Top will be 0 pixels, left will be 0 pixels, so its top left edge will be aligned with the top left edge of its container. And then we'll target the message user. Its font weight will be bold, and its font size will be 0.9 rem. Again, let's see what this looks like. We could refresh. As you can see, this is moved towards the side now. This is bold, everything's looking good. Well, I mean, we still got a lot of work to do, is what I mean by that. I'll target the message text class. Again, the font size of that will be 0.9 of the root font, and its margin will be 5 pixels vertical. Horizontal will just be 0 pixels. Below this we will target the message icons container. I'll give it margin top 10 pixels. Below that we'll target all of the individual elements in the message icons container, and we want them to be displayed horizontally. So we'll set the display to be inline block, and we'll also set the color to be grey, and we'll also give it the margin right of 10 pixels, and cursor will be pointer. Now in arrows replies container we'll say arrow replies, margin top will be 10 pixels, cursor will also be pointer. Below that We'll target all the individual elements in our replies, like so. Whoops. We want the color to be a link blue color, so we'll say 4688DE as the hex value, and display will be inline blocks, so they'll all be displayed horizontally and not vertically. And then we'll target the icon inside the arrow replies, which is yet to be created, but we'll create it sooner rather than later. So we'll say margin right, we'll give it margin right 10 pixels. Now if we go on our message, okay, that hasn't been applied. The reason being, as I already checked, it's because we didn't do the proper class names. Now if we refresh, as you can see, this is looking good now. The icon hasn't been created yet. We'll create that in a second. What we will do now is we're going to create some of the logic that this message component needs. So we'll import two hooks. We'll import the useRef hook and we'll import the useState hook. We'll create two references. We'll say const like icon equals useRef, and we'll create another one. We'll say const num likes equals useRef as well. Below that we'll create two states as well. This one will toggle the arrow, which we haven't created yet because it'll be a font awesome icon, and then set arrow up will be the method that we use to toggle it. It will be the state will be a boolean, currently set to false by default. The other state will be open reply, and then say set open reply will be the method. Again, that will be a boolean state of false. This state will be used to open up a comments box, which we haven't created yet, but we will do soon. What we'll do now is with the like icon reference that we created, we'll apply the reference to the thumbs up icon, like so. This will be used later on, so we can change the color of the icon, and we'll also give it an on click listener, which we need to create. So on click, like so, and that will be like comment. We'll also give this div, which displays the number of likes, we'll give that a reference so we can update its value. That will be num likes as so. Now the reply div, again I'll put this on another line just for ease. That will have an on click listener, which you need to create, or on click event handler, sorry. Could change open reply as so. And then this delete div will have its own on click, which will be delete message. And then this section called arrow replies, this will have its own on click, which will change the arrow element which you haven't created, called change arrow. Again, this is confusing, it will all make sense in a second, so don't worry. Below where we declared the state, we're going to create the event handlers. So we'll create a comment, we know what we're doing. We'll say toggled when cancel button and reply button are pressed, and then this will toggle whether or not the comments box, which you haven't created yet, will be visible or not. So we'll say change open reply, that event handler. That will be an arrow function, which will simply toggle the set open reply state to its opposite, its previous value. So we'll just say prev state equals opposite of prev state. So if it was false before, then now it will be true when the event handler is triggered. Below that, we will finally create the arrow element, which will be a font awesome icon. We'll just create a comment, so we know what we're doing. Up and down, toggle arrow up and down. Say let arrow equals font awesome icon, as I said before. Class name font awesome fa caret down as its class name, because it will currently by default will be pointing down. But the event handler will be const change arrow, and then like the other event handler that we created, it will toggle the set arrow up state, and it will do the same thing. So return prev state equals opposite of pref state, it's just opposite its previous value. Below that we'll create an if statement. So if that state is true, then arrow will equal its current value, except it will be an up facing arrow instead of a down facing arrow. So we'll say up instead of down. Else then it's false, so we'll copy that, but it will equal down again. And then we will insert the arrow as the first child element of the arrow apply section. So we'll use curly braces and then we'll just put in the arrow like that. And for now we will just comment out these event handlers, and then we'll just create these remaining event handlers. Yeah, but we won't do the logic, just so we don't get any errors and we can see what we've created. We'll do the logic for them later on when it's time to do them, but it wouldn't really make sense to do the logic now. As you can see, we've got this arrow here. When we click on this, it's up and then down. But what we want to do is we want to show replies when we toggle this up and off. And then also when we click on the reply here, we want to show one of these comments boxes, and we want it to appear in between the reply text and this blue text here. We want a comments box to appear in that space. So what we're going to do is we're going to create the comments box file, commentsbox.js. So inside the comments box folder, but not in any of its subfolders. And sorry, yeah, so not comments.js, comments box. Use the shortcut to create the functional component, and we'll just leave it at that for now. Actually, no, we won't. What we're going to do is we're going to copy the code, copy all of this from the top comments box. You'll see why we are doing it as a separate component later on, and obviously change this, change the name so that it's comments box and not top comments box. And we will remove this as well because we don't need it, because when we click on the cancel button, this entire comments box will disappear. You'll see how we achieve this right now actually. So we'll go back into the message. We will require that comments box component that we just created. We'll say import comments box from, we'll go up a folder, and then we'll say comments box like so. And what we want to do is we want to give the comments box component access to this change open reply function, so it can toggle the state between its, so we could toggle the state boolean, which will determine whether or not it gets displayed or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a context. To do this, we will require use context hook, and then we'll say const show reply equals react dot create context like so. And then we will create a custom hook. This will allow our children of the context provider, it will give it access to the value which is contained in the context. We'll say export a name function, use open reply will be the function name. Inside we will return the context being used in the use context hook like so. Once you've created the context, we can scroll down, and in between these two sections here in the space that I mentioned before, we will use the provider of the context. We'll say show reply dot provider with a capital P, and inside we will render the comments box as a child of the show reply provider, but we will only render it under the condition that the open reply state is set to true, and we'll render out the comment box now, which we just created. Doesn't have any content, it doesn't have any content yet. And we'll do it on another line. We'll give it the auto focus property like we gave the top comments box, so we want consistency, and we'll set that to true. So this one will be set to auto focus as soon as it's rendered, unlike the top comments box, which is only auto focused when the user focuses on the comments box. So what we need to do now is we will give the value of the context provider. We will say the change open reply method. So now comments box will have access, well, we'll be able to access the change open reply, but not at the moment because we need to do some code in the comments box. So inside we're going to import the custom hook, which will give us access to the context value. So first of all, we need to import the message component, and because it's a named export, we import it using curly braces. Use open apply like that. Now inside the comments box, we will get access to the method like so. Change open apply equals use open apply. This will now change open apply will be assigned to the method, which is currently the value of the context. And what we will do is we will call this method alongside the set show buttons state method when the user clicks on the cancel button. So we'll say change open reply like so. And now if we test this out, so we didn't copy this completely, we removed that. But now if we refresh, as you can see, we click reply, this opens up, we click off it, as you can see it's focused by default, all this is working as predicted. We click cancel, and as you can see it gets removed again. This is what we want. The next step would be to get us to be able to like this icon on the right and get it to change color when we click on it to indicate that we've liked it. So back in our application, we're going to go to our message, and as you can see, we've already got a reference set up to the icon, the thumbs up icon for this like icon reference which we created. Below this code here, which is dealing with the arrow, we're going to create a new comment so you know what we're doing. We're going to say like message. So what will happen when the user presses on the like object, which is what happens to this like comment event handler. We're going to create a boolean called toggle like, so we can deal with different states in the event handler, and we're also going to create a reference to the props.like reference in this variable here. Inside the event handler, we'll open that up. We will set the boolean to be opposite its previous value, so in this case it will be true, but when it gets run again it will be false again. So if toggle like is true, then we want to increment the number of likes and change the color of the thumbs up. So we'll say if toggle like, we will increment likes, and we will also say like icon dot current to get access to the element contained in the reference. Dot style, change its color to be a shade of blue, so we'll use a hex code. We'll say 4688DE will be the shade of blue. Else we'll decrement it, and we will set its color back to gray. So we'll say style.color equals gray as so, and that's likes, not like. Whoops. Now once all this is done, no matter what the state of the boolean was, we are going to change the text content. We're going to change the inner HTML of the element to be the updated likes number. So whether it's been incremented or decremented, it will now be the content, the inner HTML content of the num likes element. So now we can try this out in our application. We can go back, we can refresh, we can click on this. Okay, so the error was it's likes, not like. So now we do it now. Yep, as you can see, we're getting the right value, which is good. If we click on this, 26, 25, this is good. Obviously it's not stored in database yet, but we'll do that later on. Now it's time to create the sub-messages that will appear when the user clicks on the arrow to display the replies to a specified message. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to create a new section. Below the arrow replies section, we will give it a class name of sub messages, simply to separate it out from the other sections. Inside we will create a sub message component, which we haven't created yet obviously. So inside the sub message folder, which we created earlier, we'll just say the sub message .js, and again create the functional component. Its contents will pretty much resemble the message, so we'll just copy for now anyway. We'll copy this. We will make a lot of changes though. First of all, yeah, obviously we need to sub-message, change the name so it actually matches. Secondly, what we are going to do is obviously we're going to delete this, and we're going to also delete this section as well, the arrow applies section, because obviously it wouldn't make sense if this is a sub message which is displaying as a reply to the main message. It wouldn't make sense to add that blue text there again. So obviously we're going to delete this arrow content, delete the state, and what else? We don't need that anymore because you're already using it in the message itself. And the comments box component, well, we'll leave that for now. Inside the message, now we can import the sub message, so we can say import sub message from its location. So we'll say message, sub message, and now that should be in there. And as for the sub message, we won't be using the comments box itself. Instead, we will be using sub comments box. So we'll create a new folder inside the comments box folder. And what we'll do, we'll just copy, for now anyway, we'll copy the code from the comments box. Again, the reason for this duplicate code, again, it's not ideal, but because of the complex nature of the UI, it is necessary. We'll copy it in here. It will all be justified later on, down the line. Place the name again. This is the last time that I have to do this, so don't worry. We'll go back to sub message. We will import sub comments box instead. From comments box slash, we'll get the, what we'll say is, we'll go out, we'll say comments box slash sub comments box. We'll get a sub comments box, and then we'll just use that one instead. Like so, and then we'll need to pass in some properties into the sub message. So for now, we're just passing the dummy data that we need. We'll say user. Remember, some message inherited the same properties from the message which it got its copied code from. So we'll say dummy reply will be the user in this instance. Message will say this is a dummy reply, and then we'll say likes, who cares, we'll just say 2. Something like that. And now if we refresh the page, okay, we can't compile sub comments box, is the error. So we'll go here. Oh yes, because the message, that's the reason why. So we'll say, we'll go out, and then yeah, now we can access it. This is related to the global context, which is used to exit out of to close the comments box. So now when you refresh, we say comments box as well. Okay, again, oh, we don't need it anyway, because it's in the comments box. So now when we refresh, this is what we get. Obviously this apply, we only want this to show when the user presses on this to show the reply. So what we're going to do is inside the message, we will say curly braces around this entire sub message section, and then we will say the arrow up state. If that is true, then we will render out this section. Render it out like so. And now, because it's false by default, as you can see, there's no comment. Obviously that's wrong. There's not 4 applies, there's only 1 in this instance, but again, this is all dummy data, so it doesn't matter. When we click apply, that changes to arrow up, and then this applies. We click on it again, it disappears now. And then this is obviously matching, and again, same with the button. So this is all working well now. Okay, now it's time to create the back end of the project. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to go to our package.json, and we are going to proxy or unhandled HTTP requests to our local server. So below this private field, we will create a new field, and we'll call it proxy. And its value will be HTTP, it will be our local server on port 5000. We're using port 5000 because the React app is on port 3000 by default, and we just want our local server to be on a different port. So we'll set it up and put 5000. Now in our project folder, we'll create a new folder size. We'll call it backend. Inside we will initialize node package manager, so we'll create a terminal and we'll say npm init and then a y flag to say yes for everything. That's good. And now we'll open up our text editor inside this folder. In my case, I'll be using VS Code. And then inside this, we will create server.js, and this will contain, inside this will handle all of the root. Before we write any code in server.js, we're going to install two dependencies that we need. So npm I to do that, we'll say express and Mongoose. Install them like that. Once they're installed, we will say const express equals require express to require express, and we'll also require Mongoose while we're there. Require Mongoose like that. Once you created that, we will initialize the app. We'll say const app equals express method, and then we will set up the app on port 5000. So we'll say 5000 or process.env.port just for good practice. And then so we know that the server started, we'll say console.log in the callback. Server has started on port 5000 like that. And now we can go to our server, the backend folder, and we'll say nodemon. We'll first need to install nodemon. Once you've installed nodemon globally, you can start it like that, and as you can see it's working as indicated by this. So before we do anything else, we're going to set up the Mongoose schema. So what we'll do is we will create a new comment so we know what we're doing. Configure Mongoose is what it will say, and we'll say mongoose.connect, and it will say Mongo database, or DB for short, and then localhost 27017 is a default port to Mongo database, and we will call it YouTube comments, and we will call the database just YouTube comments DB, call it what you want, we use that for short. And then to avoid the current deprecation warnings, we need to use new URL parser and also use unified topology. This might have changed by the time you're watching this video, so you may need to look that up yourself if it has changed. What we'll also do is we'll say const db equals mongoose.connection. This is simply for debugging purposes, so we know whether it's connected successfully or not. So we'll say db on error. So if there is an error, then we will call this callback, which have an argument of error, and then it will log that error. Below this, we will say db once. So when we open the Mongoose connection, or when we successfully connect to Mongoose database, we will simply log connected to database, so we know that it's successfully working and that there's no errors currently. Like so, that's all good now. We will create the schema below this, so we'll say const comment schema equals mongoose.schema. Inside there will be an object, and we'll say user string. The user field message will also be a string. Below that will be likes. This will be a number instead. And then editable, this will be the boolean that determines whether or not we can reply to the comment. In other words, somebody else's comment. But if it's not somebody else's comment, then that means it's our comment. So we'll be able to delete it instead of reply to it. So that will be, we'll say boolean, that's what it is. And then replies will contain a list of objects, which will, each of the objects will represent the individual replies to a main comment. So these objects will have user string, they'll follow this format. Message will also be a string. and likes will be number. So that's the format that the replies objects will follow. What we'll need to do now is we'll need to start a MongoDB server. So we're going to open up a new terminal, doesn't matter where. We'll say mongo, open up a new Mongo server, and then we'll open up another terminal. Just simply say Mongo to open up Mongo database terminal. And yeah, we don't need to do anything with that at the moment. Make sure our NodeMon server isn't starting at the moment, so it's not running. What we will do is we will save one document into the collection, just so I could show you. So we'll say const, well, first we need to create the model actually, so comments model. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. So we'll say model comment, so which will be translated by Mongo database into comments, because it automatically pluralizes it. Comment schema that we just created, and now we can create the first document inside this collection. So we'll say const new comment equals new comments model. It needs to follow the format of the schema, so we'll say user. We will say, I don't know, who cares, just make something up, random dude. Message will be, I think this video is random. Again, I don't know, it's just dummy data. Likes, we'll say 541, and then editable will be false because it's not a comment from us, so it will be editable false because we can reply to it. And then we'll say replies, we'll give it some replies. Again, the replies will follow the format. So user, this will be Rage Dave. I completely disagree. Likes 25. Add another one just for good measure. User peanut squash. Message, I want some squash. I don't know, I'm not really thinking straight at the moment. And then we will save this like so, and then we will start up our NodeMon server so we can save this document. So we'll say NodeMon server.js as follows. And now, yeah, as you can see, we've got these two messages, which means everything's going as planned. We can go to a Mongo, we'll say show DBS, and it should be created. Just ignore this one, that's the one that I created beforehand, before I did this tutorial. So we'll say use YouTube comments DB, and then show collections, we should see the comments collection, and then db.comments.find, see all the documents, and we should see the document that we just created. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add 10 more comments into the collection, so we have a lot of dummy data to work with. I'll fast forward the video to the point where I've added all the dummy data, and one thing that I will recommend is you close the server so we don't save duplicate documents into the collection, and we delete this. So I'm going to fast forward the video now. Okay, so in the end I decided against fast forwarding it because otherwise it would just take too long, but I'll show you what I've done. What I've done is I've created this array. Each iteration of the array is an individual document that is yet to be inserted into this collection here, the comments collection. As you can see, each iteration follows the format set by this schema. The first three all have replies to them. Sorry, the first two actually. This one. The rest are just normal comments, but there's 10 of these individually, and because we've already inserted one document, that will make 11 comments in total. I know it's tedious creating this dummy data, but it needs to be done just so we can get good testing of our application. So 3, 4, 5, yeah, we've got 10 there, and the way that we're inserting it is we're using the insert many method on the model. Here is the array. The first argument is the array that we want to insert, the second is a callback. If there's an error, then we'll log the error, but else, if there isn't, then we know that it's been successfully inserted because we're going to put this here. And we're going to start our NodeMon application, and hopefully it will be inserted properly. We will say, yep, successfully inserted data, so we'll exit out that. So we won't risk getting duplicate data, and now we'll go to what our database looks like. to see if they have been successfully inserted or not. Obviously they should have. Yep, as you can see, they've all been inserted here. This is what we want. So now we can delete all of this, and now we can proceed with the application process. So in response to creating our backend, we'll go back to our message application. We will go to our message scroll and we will import the use effect hook from the app. So we'll say use effect like so, and we will open this out so we can write some content here. We also import, actually I forgot, but we'll import the useState hook as well, which we'll need because we'll need to create some state. What we're going to say that we're going to create a message state. This is a very important state because it will hold all of the messages retrieved from our database. So we'll say use state like that, just be an empty array, and we'll also say const show, whoops, we need to use array destruction, show bottom bar, and then set show bottom bar. As you guessed, this will be a boolean state that will determine whether or not we actually, it'll be set to true by default, but it will determine whether or not we will see this bottom bar and the loader contained inside of it. And here's what we're going to do now. We're going to create a comment so we know what we're doing, and we will say load up the first 10 comments. Do this either on application start or when a new comment is posted. Because of the nature of this use effect hook, those are the two times where it will be called. Because of the dependency that we will add to the use effect hook, it will be added later on, but for now it will just be an empty array. First thing that we will do is we will set show bottom bar, and we will set that to be true again, not false. The reason being is because it may have been set to false previously, and then we posted a new comment, and that's one of the conditions for this use effect hooks, and it needs to be set back to true again. Below that, we will say we'll use a fetch method, so we'll send a HTTP post request to our local server. The route will be get data, as I said before. The method will be post. This is an object which is passed into the second argument of the fetch method. Its headers will be, this is important now, when we're sending JSON data, it's very important that we include this content for the headers. If we don't do this, then the JSON data won't be sent properly, and its body will be JSON stringified because we're sending JSON data, as I just said. It will have the JSON object will have one field with the name limit num, and its value will be 10 because I said return the first 10 comments. And then on this we can say, we'll say then, so when we get a response back from the server, obviously we haven't handled the server response yet, but we'll do that in a second. We'll say res.json, so pass the JSON object received from the server into a JavaScript object, and then when that's finished we'll use another then method to do something when it's finished parsing. We'll say we'll get access to the JavaScript object which is finished parsing comments like so, and inside, because comments will be an array of documents which will relate to the individual messages, all we will do, we will say set messages comments. So now set messages will return the 10 comments retrieved from the database. But obviously we need to handle this route, this post route in our application. So below where we created the app, it's very important that it's below there, otherwise it won't work. So we'll create the route, we'll say, well first of all we'll create a comment so we know what we're doing. We'll say handle routes from this point onwards, and then we'll create another comment related to this specific route. We'll say get documents from the collection limited by the data sent in the post request. In this case that will be 10 if you remember. We'll say app.post, the route is get data, and then inside will be arguments request and response. Open that up, we'll say comments model dot find. We use empty arguments, say find everything from the collection, and then the callback will be data, short for error. So if error is initialized, then obviously there's an error, so we'll simply console.log error. We'll be doing that a lot, it's common practice. Else we will res.send data, and this is where comments gets its value in the then method. And to limit it by the limit num data that we sent over to the server in this route, on the find method we will use the limit method, and then we'll say rec.body.limit num, because remember that was the name of the JSON field. So this will currently be 10, so it will return the first 10 documents from this collection. So this route is now created, that's how we want it. What we need to do now is we need to render out this message based off of our message state, rather than just generating one message that's hard coded. This needs to be rendered dynamically. So what we're going to do is we will use curly braces, and we'll say messages to get access to, sorry, this should be messages, sorry, not message. And then we'll use the map method on it. And then inside we'll have the iterator, we'll say the iterator message. And then inside we use the arrow function, but instead of using curly braces, we use parentheses to specify that we want to return this value for every iteration. So inside the parentheses will be the message component, like so, self-closing, so you don't need children. You have key because every component generated via loop needs the key property. We'll say message dot underscore ID, that's from our Mongo database. It's a field that Mongo database automatically generates. And then use key. This will be used inside the message component, so we can make HTTP requests and we can get the key from Mongo database, and that will also be message._ID. We can't, inside the message component, we can't use this key property, which is the reason why we use this use key instead. On another line now, just because it's getting a bit crowded, we'll say user. That will be, again, these fields relate to the field set on the schema. So it'll be message.user. Editable, that will be message.editable. Below that, we'll say message.message, self-explanatory. Likes, again, no surprise, message.likes. Below that, replies, again this is the new one, message.replies. And then for this bottom bar, what we will do is we will say, put this in curly braces because you want to do some conditional rendering. We'll say messages dot length greater than 9, because you don't need this bottom bar if there's less than 9 messages, because obviously there aren't any more messages to show. And also we'll say show bottom bar, that needs to be true as well for this to be rendered. So if that is true, then we use question mark as ternary operator. So if it meets this condition here, then it will be rendered. But else we use colon. If it's not true, then we'll render nothing, so we'll say null there. What we need to do now is we need to go into message, and we will use its replies property to generate the necessary sub-messages. So what we'll do, we'll get rid of the sub-message component. We use curly braces because we're writing an expression here. Props.replies, which we passed in an array. We'll use map, reply, we'll use parentheses again instead of curly braces, show that we want this component to be returned for each iteration. Sub-message, we can close that off. Pass in similar sorts of values, but for the key, we'll just use math.random to generate our own key. It's not complicated. And then parent key property, that will be props.useKey. Remember props.useKey because that gives us access to the key from MongoDB, because we can't use the key property inside the message component itself. And then the sub ID will be reply._ID. This relates to the actual ID of the reply object contained in the Mongo database, so not its parent key. And we'll need to use this when we send fetch requests later on. And then user property will be, again, simply follow the schema layout that we created in the Mongo database. So it's user, reply.user. Message will be reply.message, again not complicated, and likes will be reply.likes. And now if we see our React app, obviously we won't have any comments loaded, but the reason being is because we haven't actually started our local server, so we'll do that now. Yep, as you can see it started, and now when we refresh, we should hopefully, okay, we're not seeing anything. The reason being is because if we go back, so I commented this out to debug because I didn't know what the error was, but I do now. It's because I forgot to include the necessary data to handle post requests in our application, in our local server. So we'll set app.require express.json. If you're using an older version of Node Package Manager, then you'll need to use body parser instead of express. We can now replace body parser with express, and we'll also say express dot URL encoded extended, and then that will be true. So once we've done this now and we start our NodeMon server, sorry again, it's app.use, it's app.use, it's not app.require. Now when we refresh it should be working, restart. So now once we've done all this and we set the messages, we set comments to the messages in the then method, we go back to application, it's working as it should. The problem is with the view 4 comments, so there's only 1 comment there and 2 comment there. A very simple way to fix this. We'll go to our sub messages. Inside we'll go to our message actually. Instead of saying view 4 replies, what we'll do is we'll say view props.likes.length, and what we'll also do is we will also only render this arrow replies section if props.replies length is greater than 0. So if there's 0 replies, then we're not going to render the section at all. So we will say props.replies.length. If that is greater than 0, as I just said, then we'll use the and as shorthand. Place the dependencies around the entire section, and then so now we refresh, or we don't really need to. We'll say okay, that's not working. Oh yeah, because it's not likes, it's replies. Sorry, I'm making a lot of mistakes now, just bear with me. So as you can see, yeah, it's working now. View 2, well there's 2 there, there's 2 there, there's 1 there, and none of these have replies, so none of this is showing up for them because otherwise it wouldn't make sense for them. Obviously this load is just there all the time because we haven't done the logic for that yet, but we're making good progress. What we need to do now is we need to refresh the message list every time a new comment is posted via the top comments box component. When this will happen, we want to call this use effect hook that we just created again. And the way that we do that is we're going to create a globally available context which will store data that we want to have available to our entire application. So we will, in the source folder, we will create an entirely new folder called context. So we'll right click on the source, we'll say new folder, context will be the folder name. Inside we will create context.js. We'll say import React from React. That should be capital actually. And then we'll create the main context. So we'll say const main context, that's what we'll call it. React.create context, like so, it's a method. And then we'll create the custom hook. Remember I explained this earlier, which will give the children of the context provider access to the value stored in the context. So we'll say return use context, so we need to import that hook, use context from React, return use context, and then it will return main context, like so. From this we'll need to create a named functional component, so it won't be a default export. We'll call it context provider. This will wrap our entire application, giving our entire application access to the context value. Inside we're going to create a state, so we need to import the useState hook. We will create a new comment showing what we're going to do. Say, well, this state boolean will be changed when we post a new comment to refresh the first 10 messages. So basically just reiterating what I just said. Obviously comments are there for future reference. We'll call it message reset, and set message reset will be the method that we use to change it. The state itself will be a boolean, currently set to false. It doesn't really matter. We're just using it to change its value so we can trigger the use effect hook, and we'll create an object which will hold all of the values that we want to be stored in the state. So currently it will hold message reset and set message reset. I forgot the equal sign there, which is foolish, but there you go. Now we want the context provider to return the provider component of the context. So we'll say return. We will return the main context provider widget, and it will wrap props.children. Props.children will be our entire application, because that's what we're going to wrap this functional component in. Now what we'll do is we'll go back to our app.js, which contains our application. We'll create a new comment below our previous import. So we know that we're importing the main context now, so we'll say main context, and then we'll say import curly braces because it's a named import, but we will require it first so we can make the autocomplete. How about the autocomplete? So context, and then inside here we'll say context provider, and then in our entire application we'll say context provider as so. The closing element tag will obviously be at the end. And now you've wrapped our entire application in the context. Now we will need to go back to our message scroll JavaScript file, and then we will create another comment, specify that we're importing with the main context, and then we will import again from the context like so, but this time we're going to import the custom hook that we created that returns the value of the context. So from here we will create a new comment. We'll say what we're going to do. We'll say when bool from main context changes, re-render message list, and then we'll use object destructuring to extract message. Well, first of all we'll say use just to help out the autocomplete, and then we'll say message reset. Well, it didn't really work there, but as you can see it's on there, it's on the value anyway. Oh wait, actually no, that's the reason why. That's very important, I picked up on that actually, because we need to set the value property of the context provider to be the object that we created, so now we can get access to the message reset. It's very important that we got that right. And then we'll add message reset as a dependency of the use effect hook. So now whenever message reset changes, this use effect will be called again. What we need to do now is we need to go back to our top comments box component. Where is it? I don't think we have it open, but here you go, it's JavaScript file, and we need to fill out the rest of the send comments event handler. So what we'll do, we'll say fetch, and this will be a post request to a new route called new comment. Again, fill out the boilerplate code when we make a new post comment with the fetch API. I would use the Axios dependency, but there's no real need anymore with the fetch API. It's only a minor convenience. The Axios dependency, you don't really need it. And then body, this is the only thing that's going to change and make a post request. It will be the message data. So what we want the message's content to be, and we'll say message.current.value. So the value of the reference that we created. So now we will go to our local server and we will handle this route. So we'll go down, create a new comment so we know what this route's for. We'll say user create a new comment from top comment box app.post. The route that we created, so new comment, comment, make sure that it needs to be matching. It's very important that it does. Again, open up like that, like we always do, and we'll create a reference to the message data, so that we sent over in the JSON object. So rec.body.message data, like so, just for easy access, and we'll create a new message, will be a constant, and it'll be a new comments model, like so. The user, again, normally we would send over the username, but we haven't created an account authentication system for reasons that I already covered. So by default, we'll just say super user. That will just be the default name for our user, and then message data will be the message content. Likes will be 0 because obviously it's been created, so how can I have any likes? Editable will be true because it's from us, the super user. And then replies, again, empty array because how can I have any replies when we just created it? And then we'll save it like so. And then what we're going to say send back empty data, so we can use promise or the then method. Res.send, so we're not actually sending back any data. The only reason why we're doing this is so we can use the then method to activate code on server response when we received a server response. So we'll say then inside of your callback, obviously. We will say reset entire comments and matching increment counter. We'll do the matching increment counter later on when we get onto the intersection observer API. But at the moment, what we're going to do is we're going to import. Again, we'll use the main context, so we'll say import from, and we need the context, so we will go all the way up and then context and then use main context again, and we will extract the set message reset from the use main context hook. So we'll say set, wait, what was it called again? So I'm trying to set message reset. There you go, equal, sorry, I keep on forgetting, yeah, there you go. Alright, that should be it now. This is a method, so it should be treated like a method. What we would say, we'll say, whoops, prev state return the opposite of the previous state. So currently it's set to false, but now it'll be set to true. Again, it doesn't really matter, we just want to change it so we can call that use effect hook and the message scroll components again. And below this we will say delete text input, whoops, update comments and disable comment btn. So what we're doing here, we'll say message dot current dot value equals just an empty string. So I just keep on forgetting that. So obviously when we post a new comment, we want the content of the text input to be reset back to an empty string, and then we want set enable btn to be true. So the button will be disabled again, and obviously because it's an empty string, so you want the button disabled state to match with the value of the string. Okay, so this is all well and good, but when we post a new comment, we won't be able to see it because that use effect only returns the first 10 messages, and we've currently got 11 messages. The 11th won't be shown yet, and neither will the 12th, so the one that we just posted, which it will be the 12th comment if we post it. So what we need to do is we need to go back to context, and we're going to create 2 more states. So the first state will be, we'll say the state that allows us to trigger either an update or delete request of an individual comment. So this state will be used, we won't be using it immediately, but we're just creating it because just for ease, so we don't have to create it later when we actually do need to use it. It will be when we either want to delete a comment or update its value, and it will currently won't have a value. And then the other one will say this is the state that holds the current increment value. This is used by the intersection observer when we fetch new comments. So this is an increment that will be very useful when we create the intersection observer, sorry, which is right now. So we'll call it comment increment. And then the method, we remember following the naming scheme, set method increment like so, and then that will be useState, and it will have a default value of a number, which is 10. What we need to do now, we'll put all of these values on the state so we can use them. Message update, corresponding set message update, comment increment, and again it's corresponding set method increment like so. Now our application can use these values. Now the problem with the intersection observer is that it's a closure, which means that it saves a snapshot of the comment increment value if you were to use it, meaning that if the callback method is called a second time, then the value used for the comment increment will be reflective of its value the first time round and not its current value. The way to get around this is to create a reference to the comment increment, and references aren't affected by the closure, so the first thing that we need to do is actually get the comment increment value from the context. Remember, comment increment is there, just paste it in there just to make sure that we got the spelling right. Below this we'll create a comment so we know what we're doing. We'll say make sure increment value in callback function function for intersection observer is up to date. And then below that we will say const comment increment ref equals use ref. But obviously, we need to import the use ref hook actually. Use ref, and then here we can say comment increment, create the reference like so. Now below all this code, we're going to create a comment. We'll say ensure comment increment is up to date. The reason being for this is if the comment increment value does change, then this comment increment ref, we want it to update along with the comment increment value, so it has matching values with the value of the comment increment. So we'll create a new use effect hook, and its dependency will be the comment increment. Inside we'll say comment increment ref dot current to get access to the value of the reference, and we'll set that to be the comment increment value, which is obviously just changed. Below this we will create a reference to the bottom bar element. So we'll create a comment called bottom bar will contain the bottom bar JSX element, and we'll say const bottom bar set bottom bar, because useState it will currently be null, and then we will add this state as a reference to the bottom bar. So next to the class name we'll say ref set bottom bar. Okay, so that's spelt wrong clearly, so set bottom bar. There you go. Look, so the reason why we're using a state to create a reference to the bottom bar rather than a reference is because the state will be reflective of the current state of the bottom bar, meaning that it will allow us to detect whether or not the element is currently rendered in the document, which is very important to intersection observer. So now above all of this, we'll create a comment so we know what we're doing. We'll say intersection observer. So this is where we actually create the intersection observer. Will be a const. We'll say just simply observer equals react.useRef. New. The reason why we use react.useRef is because we want the intersection observer object to be treated like a JavaScript object rather than a React object. So that's the reason. Intersection observer. Its first argument will be a callback function. Entries as its only argument. Because entries is a list of all the different elements that are currently being observed by the observer, we will simply extract the first entry because we're only observing one element, the bottom bar in our instance, so we're not observing multiple elements, so we'll just say entries, extract the first element like so, and then we'll say if first, which is the reference that we just created, dot is intersecting. So if the bottom bar, which we will observe later on, so if the bottom bar is fully visible in the viewport, because the viewport is the default root of the project. The reason why it's fully visible is because we're going to say for the observer's second argument, you specify properties, and our property will be threshold 1, meaning it needs to be fully visible in the viewport. So if it is, we will fetch, we will send a post request to the root, get more data, and again fill out the boilerplate code. So method, as always, post, we'll be using that all throughout the application simply because it's the most relevant one for our case. Content, type, and then application /JSON. Again, a lot of repeat code, but it's not that bad. And then JSON.stringify with the body, because obviously we're handling JSON data, not XML or anything. It'll be comment, increment will be the field name, and its value will be comment increment ref.current. So again, this is the reason why we created the reference. It's so important that the comment increment ref needs to be the up-to-date value of the comment increment. You'll see why later on. And before we do anything else, we'll copy the comment increment so we don't get it wrong. We'll go to our server, we'll create the root. We'll say, what should we say? We'll say intersection observer wants more data, and then we'll say app.post / get more data, because that's the root that we just created, and then rec.res as always, and then we will create a reference to the comment increment, so it will have the same name, rec.body.comment increment, so we don't get the names wrong, because that will cause an error. And what we will do, we'll say comment model.find, find of the documents, currently anyway, and then data as always. If there is an error, then we need to see what error we got, so we'll log that error, and then else. If there isn't, then we will send back the data which we fetched, and we will add some modifiers to this. We'll say skip, so comment increment, and then we'll limit it to 10 because we return 10 messages at a time before we need to load up new ones. And we skip, comment increment is currently set to value 10, so we won't get back repeated comments because we'll skip those comments. And then we go back to our message scroll, and what we will say is we will create the then callback on this fetch API method. Actually, before that we need to, because we are getting back data, we need to pass that JSON data. So we'll say res.json to pass it, closing parentheses. Another then callback, so we can execute code when it's finished parsing. That will actually take in comments as its argument. If comments.length greater than 0, so in other words, if there are comments past the 10 comment mark, then we will push these comments to the messages state array. The way that we'll do that without overwriting the messages that we've already got rendered, we'll say set messages prev state to get access to its previous state, and then we'll return, we'll use the spread operator to return all the iterations that we already have on the state, and then we'll also use the spread operator on the comment which you got back. Now to simulate loading on a server, we use a set timeout function, and then we'll do this in a set timeout after 3 seconds. It's 3000 milliseconds, same thing. Copy this, paste it in there, and then else. So if we haven't got any comments received, we will again use a set timeout just to simulate the loading. That will again be 3 seconds. And then and then inside we will set show bottom bar. Set it to false, so the bottom bar is now disappeared. Now outside of the if else block, we will need to increment the set increments for the next time. We want to load up more data, so we will import the We'll just go to the comments so we don't mess up the spelling. Set method increment is what it makes more sense. I don't know why it's called set method increment. It should be set comment increment. That makes more sense. I don't know why I called it that. I just got a bit carried away. So below the else block, we will say, actually no, we need to retrieve it from the custom hook first, and then we can use it. Set comment increment, previous states, we can get access to previous state, which is currently 10. I'll say previous state, we will increment it plus equals by comments.length. But the reason why comments.length rather than 10 is because in our case, you've only got 12 comments in total, so comments will only contain 2 objects and not 10. So we don't always want to increment it by 10 is what I'm trying to say. And then I'll post a comment so we know why we use comments.length. So I said we use comments.length just in case there are not 10 comments left, as so. The last thing that we want to do is actually observe the bottom bar using our intersection observer object, because it's currently not being observed, which means it won't be an entry to the intersection observer. That's what we want to do. We'll do this in a use effect because the bottom bar may not be rendered to the document yet. So we'll say use effect. Again, like so, the dependency will be bottom bar, meaning this use effect hook will be called whenever the bottom bar changes. And we'll create a reference to the bottom bar. We'll say current bottom bar equals just the bottom bar, as so. And we'll also create a reference to the current observer. So we'll say const current observer object, which is a reference. So we say observer dot current, like so. And then we'll say if current bottom bar. If it's initialized with a value, then we'll observe it because it's been created and we need the observer to observe it. So we'll say current bottom bar observe current observer dot observe current bottom bar be what it observes. And then what we need to do now is we need to make use of what's called the cleanup function in the use effect hook. The way that we use it is we get the use effect hook to return a function. This function we called before the next time the use effect hook is called, and the reason why we're calling it is basically the next time the use effect hook is called, it may be because the bottom bar is no longer initialized with a value. So we don't want to observe an uninitialized bottom bar, so we want to observe it just in case. So we'll say current bottom bar. So if bottom bar, because that's the case that we observe the current bottom bar, we need to unobserve it in the cleanup function. So I'll say current observer dot unobserve current bottom bar, like so. And now this is everything that we need to do for the intersection observer. So now if we go to documents, refresh everything, make sure everything's running as it should be, make sure, okay, this looks fine. If we scroll down, we should wait for a bit. There's 10 comments here, and as you can see, these are appeared now, and you scroll down, but there's only 1 comment that's been loaded, so 11 in total. And now if we paste a new comment, this is the 12th comment. Post that, click cancel, and scroll down. Again, it's now disappeared because everything's refreshed as it should be. This is the 12th comment. Oh, yeah, and yeah, that's good actually. Wait a sec. Oh wait, no, it's not. Okay, I forgot to mention we are actually getting a bit of a problem there. As you can see, we only got when we scrolled down, we only got the 12th comment, and we missed out the 11th comment. The reason for this is because we need to go back to the top comments box, and we need to reset the increment counter. As I said here, we just forgot to do it. Or I forgot to do it, sorry, let's not put the blame on you. Innocent viewer, so we'll say set comment increment. We'll get that from the context. Where is it? Top comments box. Again, extract it using object destructuring, set comment increment, and then simply we'll set it back to 10. So now it should be working out, because when we post a new comment, it'll be set back to 10 because all the messages, the first 10 messages will be displayed again. So we scroll down, as you can see, yeah. And then if we do this is the 13th comment, we should see the 11th, 12th and 13th comments all together. So we scroll down, it's all been refreshed. And then, yeah, I like round spoon, yeah. And then, yeah, this is all working good now. Okay, so it's working as intended, which is good. Again, like I said, if you wanted the latest comments to be displayed first, you would simply reverse the array when you render out the message array component. So you would say, you would use the reverse message on the messages when you use the map function, but I like it how the latest comment last, but obviously it's up to you really how you want it. There's no guidelines on that. The next thing that we need to do, so what we're going to do now, we're going to create the code that allows us to reply to a user's comment. So we will go to the comments box component and we will update the send comment event handler. What we'll say, we use the fetch method. We will use the fetch method to send a post request. Again, post request, as I said, we use this a lot. Sub comment will be the root, completely new root, which is yet to be created. Again, all this boilerplate code. Nothing special about this. Content type hyphen application /JSON. And then body, we will say json.stringify. And then this will have two fields. The first one will be the message ID, and then that will be props.useKey. This will give access to the Mongo database key value. And then the second field will be message data, and then that will be the message.current, because remember you created the message reference. It will be the value of the input text. So now we'll need to handle this on our local server. So go into our node.js file. We will say user creates a new comment from subbox. So we'll say user creates a new comment from subbox. We'll say app.post on that root. New sub comment like so rec.res. And we'll create references to both of the fields in our JSON object which we're sending over. So this one will be rec.body.messageData, hence the name of the variable, and then this one will be message ID equals rec.body, and you guessed it, message ID. And then below this we'll say create new subdata based on data posted. So we'll create a new message, a sub-message object, so one that gets put into the replies field, which is an array. So we'll say new sub message equals an object. The user, we posted it, so it will be C for user because that's what we're using for our name. Message will be message data, and then likes will simply be 0. And then below that we will say comment model dot update 1, and then we will say ID, message ID, which is how we identify the document that you want to update. And then we will say push, so we want to push this new value to the comments, to the replies array, sorry. So we'll say replies will be the field name, and then the value that we want to push, which is a new sub-message, the object that we just created. And after this we want to say data, obviously, do what we always do. So if there's an error, we'll just do this inline now, console.log, because if there isn't, then we'll say send back empty data so we can use promise, again what we did before, that trick. So you can simply activate code upon server response. So now we can use the then callback method, and we don't need to pass any data because we're not getting any data back really, we're just getting an empty value, empty response. And what we'll do is we will, remember when I said before that this set message update, this state here is used, well, read the comment, it says either update or delete. So what we need to do, we'll get access to this set message update in the comments box. Oh wait, actually we haven't even imported the use main context yet, so we'll do that now. And then so we'll get access to the context, and then obviously what we've always done, which is use main context. and then we will say set message update from use main context. Again, now you've got access, so we can change the state. So we will, in the then callback, we will say, and it will be an array. 1 will be the first iteration. This will become more clear later on. Props.use key will be the second iteration, and then we want to say reset reset everything so it resets, and then we'll say message.current.value. We'll set that to be an empty string again, and we'll also say set enable btn will be false, so it removes any data that we passed into the text input, and we disabled the comment button again. Now, because in the sub message, because we don't have a editable field, as you can see, if we, yes, it doesn't actually have an editable property, so we can't really use that. What we will say is, though, we will say if props.user equals super user, so we know that it's a must. Yeah, as you can see, it matches the name. So if that is the case, then actually we need to change this around. So if it's not equal to super user, then obviously we can apply to it. But if it is, then it's from us, so we need to delete it. And now that was slightly off a bit because I just remembered that we need to do that, something that we need to do. And now what we need to do, we'll copy this code here into our sub comments box with some alteration. So in the send comment, it's got one there, so we can apply to a comment from the user replies as well. What we would do though is we'll make some autocad. So first of all, obviously we need to import the main context. Before we talk about doing anything else, it's very important, so we'll do that now. Make sure we go high enough so we can get access to the context, and then we say use main context. Make sure there's no mistakes, just copy it entirely, because everything will be messed up if we don't copy the name accurately. There you go, copy it like so, and then what we'll do is we'll remove these two values, and we will also, instead of using props.use key, we'll say props.parent key, because that's the relevant property that we need access to. The reason why we remove those two values is because when we update the messages using the global state context, the sub comments box.js itself is re-rendered as it is a child to the sub message component. And if we try and change those two values when this sub comments box component is being re-rendered, then that will cause an error. Now that's all well and good updating the message, but we actually need to, what we'll do, we'll go back to our message scroll.js file, and above the intersection observer, what we're going to do is we'll create another use effect that will have the dependency of message update. So whenever, as you can see, whenever this message update changes using set message update, this use effect hook will be triggered. And the reason for this, we will basically detect the comment that has been made changes to, and we'll do that through the ID which we gave the message update state as its second iteration, and then we will update that individual message with the new message retrieved from the database, so the comment updates visually on the screen without refreshing the page. So we'll create a new comment saying either update or delete an individual comment, so we know what we're doing, and then we create the use effect hook. As I said before, the dependency will be message update, but I don't think we haven't got that from the context, so we'll say message update. So there you go, get it like so, and then we'll say if message update, because this use effect will also be called on component creation, but when it's called message update, it won't be initialized with a value, so none of the code contained in this if block will be called, which is what we want. And then we say if message update, if the first iteration of it is 1, then that means we update, else if it's not 1, we delete a comment. Again, this is for future reference, so we know the meaning of the 1 and 2 values we haven't used. second value yet, but we will later on. So if the first iteration is 1, which it is in our case, when we're updating the comment, we'll say fetch new method, new root, update comment. Again, hope you're not tired of doing this, because it is the nature of asynchronous applications. A lot of asynchronous requests. Content type, application, application slash JSON, and then body will be JSON.stringify. Comment ID will be the field name, and then its value will be not semicolon, we want a real colon, full colon. Message update 1, which remember will contain the ID of the comment. Now we will go to our local server and we will handle this post route. So below everything that we've already created, okay, so new comments, we know what we're doing. And we'll say app.post, whoops, no, we want not the comment, we'll say user wants to update comment. Below that we'll say app.post, update comment, res, let comment ID equals rec.body.comment ID, that field that we sent over as a JSON object, and then we'll say comments model dot find one. We'll find it based off the ID, so we'll say ID comment ID, and then we'll create the callback, so we'll say data, open the callback function up like that, and then we'll say and then if the error is false, we'll say res.send data back to application, so we can use the JSON. So what we've done here is we've found the document, the matching ID from the collection, and we simply sent it back to application. So now we can use the then callback on this fetch request, and obviously we'll need to decode the response document as follows. Once that's done, we will call the returned document, we'll call it comment data, and then we'll say update comment, pass in the comment data. The update comment's a function which we are going to create now. So below our user effect hook, we'll say function update comment data, and then we'll open the function as like follow, and then we'll say current message, and that will be, we'll spread out the message using the spread operator. So messages, not message, because it's a state. The reason why I use the spread operator is because an array is a reference type object in JavaScript. So if we make changes to current message and we don't use the spread operator, then we'll also make changes to the messages array. This is not what we want. We only want to make changes to the current message. So we use the spread operator to allocate new space to the array in the memory, for the array in the memory, sorry. And then we say if comment data, so if it does have a value, we'll say let current message index equal current message dot find index. So current message will be an array of objects, and we want to find the document inside that array that matches the ID of the comment data ID, which is the specific document that we want to update. So we'll say message will be the iterator in this method, message dot underscore ID, which is the field generated by Mongo database automatically. It needs to match with the comment data. The comment data's ID, and now this will contain the index where it matches, and we'll say current message dot splice. Current message index is where we will splice, and we will move the current document and replace it, hence the 1, and replace it with the comment data, which is the updated document. Finally, we will simply set messages to the current messages like so. Okay, the only thing that's required in order for the update comment to work, what we'll need to do is on this message, where is it? The comments box. As you can see, if you go to the comments box, in the fetch new subcomment, we are using the props.use key, but we haven't actually given this message component, sorry, the comments box component, the use key property, so we're going to do that now. We'll say use key, and then it will equal props.useKey on the message component, and we'll do the similar thing for the subcomments box. On this time we called it parent key, the property, so we'll say parent key, and then we will say props.parent key like follows. The reason being is because this sub message is actually supplied with parent key, so we just do it for matching purposes. And now when we go into we refresh it, we go into application, we say this is a reply, and then we post it, and then it's still not working. We didn't use, it should be use key with a capital K, because that's what it is. Yeah, and then so capital K, but I didn't, for some reason I just made a couple errors here. It's comments box, and then we use it, make sure it's got capital K, make sure it's got capital K there, sub message, use key parent key, and we go on sub message, it should be with a capital K. Sorry, sub comments box should be parent key, and then it should work now. So if we refresh, we go apply here. This is a reply, we click comment, and as you can see, finally it's working now. We can see we got this is a reply here. What we need to do now is find a way to delete these comment in real time. It's the way that we applied. It didn't, if you noticed, it didn't refresh the page, it just updated in real time. We want to do the same thing but deleting the comments instead. So in the message.js file, what we'll do is we've already set up the delete message event handler. So inside of it, what we'll do is we'll set a fetch. The root will be delete comment, and again, like we've always done, method we post headers, make sure that it works, will be content type, we need to make sure that it's a colon, application /json, and then body json.stringify message ID, and then we'll say props.useKey. Again, remember, make sure capital K, very important, I've got that wrong previously. And then we'll say then set message, we need to import it first, remember. So set message update. Okay, we haven't actually got the main context yet, so we'll get it now very quickly. Import from, and you just get access to it, so like so. And then was it use main use main context, and then we need to get access to the set message update method, so we'll just copy it here to make sure there's no spelling discrepancies. So we'll say const equals use main context method, because it's custom hook if you remember. So then we'll say set message update, very simply array will be 2 signify delete, because remember the if statement, props.useKey, and then we'll need to create the root handler for this. So we go back to our server, we say user to delete a message app.post, the root will be delete comment, the one that we just created, and then we'll say create the callback function. Inside the callback function we'll get access to the message ID from the JSON object that we sent over, like so, and then we'll say comments model.delete1, and then we will find document based off its ID and the message ID which we got sent over to the database, and then to call that function for that we will just say if there is an error then we need to see that error, so we'll log it, else we'll say, again we'll just copy this just for brevity because this video is incredibly long, just so we can use the then method which you've already created just for ease. Now what we need to do is we need to go back to our message scroll, and remember this if statement here, what happens if it's not 1, what happens if it's 2. So what we need to do is we say else if message update the other use case, so if it's 2 then we need to open that up, and what we'll do is we'll say delete comment. We'll call this function, which we are going to create right now. So function delete comment, and again we will create a copy of the messages using the spread operator. Exactly the same as before, and then we'll say let current message index, like we did before, equals current message dot find index, find index message, and then it will return the condition message dot underscore ID equals to the message update property, the ID which is stored in the second item of the array, where you find the document where the ID of the messages and the ID of the message update match, and then we will say current message splice on current message index as before, and then we'll just remove one, but you won't replace it from anything, and then we'll say set messages. Again, it will just be current message, like so. Now we've handled the delete message, what about the delete sub message? So inside that we need to, first of all, let's not waste any time. We know what we want now. We say import the main context. So import it like that. Use main context, and then what do we need? We need the set message update, so we'll just copy that just so we don't get it wrong. Where is it? Sub message. Inside we'll say const, and then use a main context like so. Easy enough. And then we'll need to send a new fetch to an entirely new route. This will be slash delete subcomment. And again, I'm sorry, but I know you've seen this far too many times or done it, but it is what it is. The body will be message ID, and it will also be props.parents key, and it also have another field, sub ID. This will help us identify the reply that we need to update, and then that'll be props.sub ID, which it got from the message. Remember, if we say sub ID, it's the individual reply IDs, so that's where it comes from, just in case you forgot. And then on the then, we use the then method. We don't need to decode anything, because it will just be sending back empty data. We'll say set message update, and then we'll say one props.parent key. We use 1 instead of 2 is because we're deleting a reply on a message. We're not deleting the message itself. So you want to update the message to reflect the deleted reply. So then we go back to our server. We'll create the route as follows. We'll say user wants to delete a sub message with a comment at .post. The route will be delete sub comment, and then we'll say res let message ID equals rec.body.message ID, and then we'll say sub ID, because remember there was 2 fields, so rec.body.sub ID, and then we will say comments model.update 1, find the document with the matching ID as the message ID, and then we will pull instead of push, so we use the query operator, pull. We will pull from the replies array, and we will pull the item from the replies array, which is ID field matches the sub ID, and then the callback function again will just be, we will say if then we'll console.log else we'll do what we've always done, send back empty data, And now after all that, make sure everything's working. Yep, everything seems to be working fine. So now we can, now we can click delete here, and then it deletes in real time. And we can also scroll down, delete in the individual comments that you wrote. So delete this one, delete that one, easy like that. And then this loads, but it should disappear because we couldn't see there's no data. And then obviously, again, I just want to show you some more. So this is a reply, everything's working as it should. The final thing is just to store these comments. So as you can see when we like, but it's not stored in the database. So that's the final thing that you want to do. So in our message.js file, we will go to it, and then we'll go to where this like comment event handler, we will create a new comment, so we know what we're doing. We'll say store this new value in the database. Fetch will be to the root, update like, and then the method again, I know, just in case you're not already tired of this, because you're a masochist, I don't know. Application /JSON. Below that we'll say body JSON.stringify message ID props.use key, remember capital K so you don't make that same mistake for the 10th time. Likes field be likes, because remember likes is this variable here, which simply create a reference to the props likes, that's all it is. Now we don't need to use the setMessageUpdate method from the global context because the HTML content is already changed earlier on in the event handler. But what we need to do though is we need to handle the event, obviously. Sorry, we need to handle the post route in our local server, so we'll say user has liked /unliked message, and then app.post /update like. Oh man, open up like so. I say let message ID equals, yeah, I'm getting sloppy now. We'll just copy this just for ease. I don't know if it's any faster to be honest, but we will get a reference to likes as well, so we say rec.body.likes, and then we will say comments model dot update one. Update the document that is matching ID is the message ID, which is sent over from our application, and we will update its likes field to match the likes value that we sent over from the database. And then in the callback we will simply, if there is an error, then we will log that error. Simple enough. Final thing, we will simply copy this for the sub message. If we want to like a sub message, we'll just paste it in like that. Things that will change, we'll say update sub -like, and then we will say props dot, instead of use key, the relevant property, which is parent key, and we'll also say sub ID as well. We'll add this field, and then that will be props dot sub ID. Add a comment, it's very important. And then I need to handle this route as always. So below, add a semicolon, we'll say user has liked /unliked sub -message. Let's keep things consistent. App.post update sub like is the root name endpoint, and then we'll say create the callback. Create references to both of these things, the message ID and also the sub ID and also the likes. So likes equals rec.body.likes. Below that we'll say comments model the update one, update documents that has matching IDs, and then in a comma in this first object we will say a string replies, and then ID, and then colon sub ID. The reason for this is basically we're saying target the item from the replies array that has a matching ID as the value stored in the sub ID, and then we will say we'll use the set to change its value. We will use a string replies dot $sign dot likes. This is basically saying change the object in the replies array, change its likes field to match likes data which we sent over from application, and this will be on the object from in the replies array that matches the sub ID as made in this query here. And then again, final thing, if then we need to log that, but we don't need to send any data back, so it's nice and easy. And then now everything should be working properly, so we can we'll give this guy a like, why not? As you can see, yeah, because we haven't signed up user authentication, we can like again, which obviously isn't really accurate. But again, this video isn't about user authentication, it's about this comment system here, this dummy comment system, which isn't even a real website. And we can also like this guy as well, and it will save. So when we refresh the page, we go, yeah, 5 comments. And yeah, I mean, this is the complete application. Obviously, everything's working as intended. I mean, we got there in the end. I know it was long and it was strenuous, but we learned a lot of information. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, then please like and subscribe. You would be doing me a huge favor if you did that. And also post your comments and queries in the comments box below. I would be very happy to see them, and I'll respond to them in the best of my ability. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great day, and peace out. I'll see you in the next one.